Welcome back, everybody, to the Rabbit Hole Sports and Media YouTube channel. A little bit of a special episode today. No new gameplay, but we will be talking everything Sonoma State Dynasty. This is something I've been wanting to do and been working on the whole time I've been away, so I apologize for my absence balancing real life responsibilities because I don't make any money off of this. I do enjoy doing it. Would love to make this a full-time job someday. Hopefully this will be a stepping stone towards that, but because that is not the case right now, it does take me a little bit to put together some things, especially something like this. And this episode is a deep dive into this series, into this dynasty, what makes this series different from any other college football 25 series on YouTube, any other sports series on YouTube. If you need a reason to justify why you watch this in front of people or to people, just show them this video. This is, I don't want to say educational, but I want to think of this as more football science, football food for thought, so to speak. Hopefully it will all make more sense as I get into it. But we have 4 parts to this series here. I'm gonna try to keep each under 10 minutes, but it will depend on how much of a tangent I go on with everything. So with that being said, in this part 1, we're gonna look at the big picture, why I'm playing college football 25, what problem are we trying to solve in college football, and what solutions are we trying. In the second part, we're gonna talk a little more SSU specific, challenges facing medium/smaller programs, and my vision for tackling those challenges. And then in parts 3 and 4, we're going to get a little more team specific in what we're doing on the field. Offense, defense, how we're putting the pieces together to level the playing field and guide Noma Nation, the Seawolves, hopefully to a national championship before the launch of college football 26. We got about 5 months. I need to pick up the pace where we're only going to play 3 or 4 seasons. But let's get started. Why college football 25? Well, it's the first college football video game in 11 years. We had NCAA 14, and then the huge Ed O'Banion. What? I apologize, I'm mispronouncing the name. But there was a whole litigation on, athletes being paid, yada yada. Anyway, that has been somewhat resolved, at least to a point where we have a college football video game back. So because it is the first one in forever, it felt the most enticing game to choose to do a series with. And then also, college football 25, I love the creativity allowed through the team builder tool. It allows you to create your own school, which I think is awesome. And that's really one of the great things I think video games offer is creativity. And not to get too much into a rabbit hole, but I think video games and sports kind of sum up a big viewpoint I have, which is that there's a lot of things in this world that can kind of get a bad rap, viewed as distractions, viewed as pointless. And while it's hard to say those things are wrong, I think the thing that gets overlooked is how through our own individual and societal choices, we can make these really useful tools to help us, solve real-world problems and get experience we wouldn't otherwise have and face challenges we wouldn't otherwise get the chance to face and solve. And that way, we know how to work and solve problems and come up with solutions. So anyway, not to go on too much of a tangent, but that is a huge part of it too. And college football certainly has its problems and challenges, and I think they're unique compared to professional sports. And we'll get into this more, but one of the dynamics, obviously, is the big school versus the small school. And as much as, you could say, well, we want a more level playing field, it's like, well, one of the things that makes college football special is that you have these big and smaller schools, and it's cool to see smaller schools win, right? Like I was reading up on the Milan high school basketball team in Indiana, who the Hoosiers movie is based off of, with Gene Hackman, who actually just died. Rest in peace. Anyway, all kinds of tangents here in this one. But I was reading up on that team, and one of the things I didn't really realize made that movie so special and like that real life story so special is that in Indiana, they only had one state championship for basketball. There were no divisions for smaller schools. So it was every school in the state grouped together, and this school of just 161 students went and won the state championship. And, we get that in college football, and that's a super awesome thing that we don't want to get rid of, but we definitely need to figure out, all right, what's a realistic level of small school that could still win? And then if you are a small school, what do you need to do to go in? Because you can complain about, disadvantages all you want. At the end of the day, when push comes to shove, we need to go get stuff done. And then anyway, gun to my head, football is my favorite sport. So moving on, college football, a little bit of anarchy, NIL, transfer portal, conference realignment, bias, superiority, evolution versus tradition, lack of strong governing body. Yes, that is a shot at the NCAA. Listen, they're in a tough position, I understand, but holy smokes, they do not help themselves out one bit. That is just a whole other discussion. We don't need to get into that now. But things are complicated, and the picture is muddy in college football, and I think they're really stuck in a position of, do we want to kind of go forward and really just center ourselves around these super big programs and kind of get rid of, the small programs? Like, walk-ons are getting gotten rid of? I don't know how to properly say that, but walk-ons aren't going to be a thing. And like, that's one of the things about college football that's so awesome, is that you have guys that are these super highly recruited players, but then you also have these dudes that no one gives attention to, and it's just one program gives them a chance and they end up being great players. The odds are long, I understand that, but that's one of the things about college football and really sports in general that's so awesome. Just college football really has the opportunity to display it in a really, I don't even know the right way, expanded, maybe? I guess just a greater scale is really what I'm trying to say. So I'm trying to find the balance here of how do we allow these big programs to go play big games, reward them for such, but then also, how do we give these smaller schools a fair shot in the fight? Right? And from a big picture standpoint, how do we appease both of those sides? And that's what we're trying to figure out. So my initial solution here, and I put parentheses around solution because to a large degree, I think this just kind of puts college football in a more real scope of how it operates, if that makes sense, which is that you have these these two bigger conferences that have kind of separated themselves as consistently producing the top end teams in the Big Ten and SEC. And then you have kind of another cluster of conferences that have consistently really good teams, but just don't quite have the ability to go up with top end teams, at least from a year in, year out standpoint. Apologies if you all heard that sniffle right there. And then you have kind of a group of teams where it's, they kind of feel lucky to be there, with all due respect, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because, again, like I said, small schools I think are important and add to what makes college football so awesome, but it is getting to the point where there is a solid quantity of schools where it's just like, you're not really competing for the same thing, ever. So what are we doing? And part of that is that bowl games have become less meaningful, so it feels a little more like they're playing for less. So anyway, trying to find a mix of how we can keep all these teams happy. I really think the ultimate solution we'll see in real life is there's a separation within FBS, and we have kind of the Big Ten and SEC and maybe some high-end teams in other conferences go make like a premier or super division or whatever, and then FBS ends up being kind of, more of those smaller power programs and the group of four. But anyway, so in the Super 2, I'm trying to honor realignment while also keep certain traditional rivalries alive. So I won't go team for team in the Big Ten and SEC, but that is them. It is 18 teams in the Big Ten and SEC. They are the same every single year, although I'm thinking every 4 years we'll kind of either realign the conferences, or if we get like a power conference that kind of shows they can match the Big Ten and SEC standard, maybe we'll rearrange how we view everything, if that makes sense. But the Super 2 here, biggest programs, geography for the most part, be darned. Big schools, big names, big money, not everything I love, but at the end of the day, these games are super, super interesting. So, these to me are the teams that have the resources to most consistently compete for national championships. But if you think a certain team belongs in a different tier or a different conference, let me know in the comments, because I by no means believe that I have the correct answer to anything here. We're just trying things out, seeing if we can come up with a solution, because that's life, right? So in the Power Four, we give the American Conference a bit of a lift here, and we'll label them a Power Four. We also revive the Pac-12, so like SMU being in the Pac-12, along with Stanford and Cal. It's just because I cannot stand the idea of them in the ACC. And also, I have a little bit of a different angle I think the ACC could pursue if something like this really sort of took shape in college football. But that is the Power Four: ACC, American, Big 12, and Pac-12. A little more geography-based, but meant to be the teams that have the resources to be consistently good, but it would be very sporadic and rare that one of these teams was really national championship level. Could happen, but not something you'll see super often. And then the Group of Four, like I said, kind of just lucky to be here. We do have a promotion-relegation dynamic with them, so the teams with the stars next to them are teams that, if you watch the actual dynasty in this season coming up, they are playing up in their affiliated power conference. So the CUSA is paired with the ACC, the MAC with the American, the Mountain West in the Pac-12, and the Sun Belt in the Big 12. And so every season, two teams from the affiliated group conference play up in the power conference. The lower finishing of the two teams playing up, based on conference record, is replaced by the conference champion in the actual group conference that year, if that makes sense. So last season in the Pac-12, we had Texas State and Sam Houston playing up. Texas State actually made the college football playoff, which was super awesome, because we do want to see some of these smaller programs get themselves into the mix. So awesome to see that in year one. But Sam Houston finished the lower of Texas State and Sam Houston, and then Wyoming won the Pac-12, or won the Mountain West, actually in an upset over North Texas. North Texas was ranked like 15 or something, and Wyoming was 6-6, but they won the conference championship game, so they get the promotion into the Pac-12 for this season, and we will play them, I want to say, our second to last game of the season. So tune in to see us play a Pac-12 conference game against the Wyoming Cowboys. But to sum up real quick, Super 2, biggest brands across the country, not too much of a concern for geography. I guess there is more of like a north-south separation between the Big Ten and SEC, but we do have Southern California schools and USC and UCLA in the Big Ten as well. So not like a hard geography cutoff there. The Power Four, more geography-centric, have the ability to be in the mix with the elite teams, but not consistently take them down. And then the Group of Four, teams with the least amount of resources, primarily based on geography, and we're trying to see if they can kind of build themselves up and get but I don't know, be more nationally competitive, I guess is the right way to put that. And then some other nuggets, because, again, college football is not the only sport, it's not the only thing at play when making these decisions. So I tried to incorporate some non-football factors that could influence these conferences, like Kansas being in the Big Ten. Their basketball brand is big enough to do that, and they could certainly view a jump to a super conference being appropriate for their basketball team, as well as being something that could kind of elevate their football program and take them to another level. And they have been much more consistent in recent years, as opposed to what they were back in my childhood, where they really, really struggled. But Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern, they all moved to the American to be more consistently competing for championships, maybe have a better route to the playoff. I think Northwestern makes the most sense to do that because of their academic record. I think their brand probably isn't as tied to being a Big Ten school as Illinois or Minnesota. I feel like they could a lot more easily say, you know what, if you guys are going to go down this route, we don't really need to oblige. We'll be all right. We're going to go somewhere else for football or our athletics, and we'll be okay. Where Illinois or Minnesota, I could definitely see where they're like, well, we'll try to make it work because being in the Big Ten kind of elevates them. And then Rutgers as well. I also moved them to the American, but kind of regretted not finding a way to get them into the ACC, because with them I'm trying to do sort of a half Big Ten revival while also trying to build a bit of a basketball super conference. I think they could look at what they have in North Carolina, Duke, and Louisville, and go after some teams like Kentucky and UConn and say, hey, like from a basketball standpoint, we think we could compete with the SEC with you guys. Now, the SEC obviously is a super elite basketball conference, so it would certainly take some selling. But for Kentucky, if they were like, hey, yeah, we want to go be in this conference for basketball, we don't think we'll take a huge dip in revenue doing that, and we'll also be able to consistently compete for conference championships in football in the ACC, because the ACC losing Clemson, Miami, Florida State to the SEC, that conference really becomes open for a team to take over in football, and Kentucky could view themselves as potentially being that team. And then Vanderbilt to the American is interesting because I kind of wanted to rival them with Northwestern, since they're two of the more prestigious academic schools in the nation and within FBS college football. The thing with Vanderbilt, though, is their athletics beyond football really are SEC caliber. So I feel like they would probably try to move strictly for football. I don't think they would fully abandon the SEC. And I think the SEC would be willing to do that if it meant they could bring in teams like Florida State, Clemson, Miami. I put Georgia Tech in there as well, which, again, a controversial one. I'm not specifically saying Georgia Tech is a clear Super 2 caliber team. They did win a national championship in the 90s, so it's not super unrecent. Same with Colorado in the Big Ten. But I also wanted to keep them, or I wanted to put them in a conference with Georgia, but then I messed up and put them in different divisions, and they're not even playing each other this year, so I kind of played myself with that one. So they may move out. Mississippi State is another team where it's like, kind of makes sense for them to go somewhere else, but at the same time, they're in a tough spot, right? Because their head coach was Mike Leach, and he died, and he's one of my favorite coaches ever, and you're not expecting that. That's such a horrible, horrible thing to have to overcome. And so they're in a tough spot now, understandably, and honestly, most of my life, they've been pretty solid, right? They've never been, they haven't had that LSU like couple of seasons where it was like, oh my goodness, like they're as good as anyone, right? But they've been a pretty consistent 8, 9, 10 win program in the SEC. So I feel like it makes sense to leave them there. But yeah, I could see where maybe Georgia Tech doesn't make a ton of sense to move in, but I feel like you could validate it. So again, every 4 seasons going to look to reline or revamp kind of the method of what we're doing. Maybe we'll get into, my kind of hope is we'll get to like a Super 4, a Power 3, and a Group of 3. Something more like that. Or maybe just like a straight up Power 5 and Group of 5 again. Would be awesome. But anyway, we'll see where it goes. This is where we are starting. But that is the end of part 1. And next time, we'll get a little more SSU specific. I am uploading these the same day. So if you want to watch these all in one go, they are ready for you. But that is the end of part 1, and I will see you in part 2.